Sonic the Hedgehog has been fighting the same Fat Man for 34 years, and the Fat Man keeps finding new gods, new dimensions, and new cosmic horrors to strap himself to because the robots stopped working around 1998. Here is every major villain explained. Dr. Eggman. He is the constant, the only villain who has appeared in every mainline Sonic game, every cartoon, every comic continuity, and every film, and whose presence is so foundational to the franchise that removing him would be like removing gravity from physics. Dr. Ivo Robotnik, self-rebranded as Dr. Eggman, is a mechanical genius whose intelligence quotient of 300 makes him the smartest human being in the Sonic universe by a margin that the franchise treats as scientific fact rather than character boast. His ambition has never changed across 34 years of games. He wants to conquer the world and build Eggman Land, a theme park industrial complex dictatorship whose architectural renderings appear in multiple games and whose design philosophy blends amusement park aesthetics with military infrastructure in a way that communicates exactly who Eggman is. A man who wants to rule the world and wants the world to be fun while he rules it. Eggman's genius is real. His robots are real threats. His death eggs, his space stations, his egg fleet, his dimensional weapons, each one represents an engineering achievement that no other human in the franchise can replicate. And each one is defeated by a hedgehog who does not engineer anything, who does not plan anything, who simply runs at the problem fast enough to break it before the problem can finish deploying. The dynamic has sustained the franchise since 1991 because the dynamic is not about power, it is about philosophy. Eggman believes the world can be improved through control. Sonic believes the world is fine the way it is. And the war between those two beliefs has produced 53 games, 7 television series, 4 films, and hundreds of robots whose wreckage litters every continent the franchise has ever depicted. Eggman is not the franchise's most powerful villain. He is not its most dangerous. He is its most persistent, and persistence, applied across 3 decades without a single permanent victory, is either the franchise's most inspiring piece of character writing or its most tragic, depending on whether you believe a man who has failed 1,000 times and built 1,001st robot is an optimist or a patient whose condition the franchise refuses to diagnose. Metal Sonic. He is the mirror that wants to replace the reflection. Metal Sonic is a robotic duplicate of Sonic the Hedgehog, built by Dr. Eggman to match Sonic's speed and destroy the organic original through mechanical superiority. His design is the franchise's cleanest piece of villain aesthetics, a blue metallic chassis with a jet engine in his torso, red eyes behind a black visor, and proportions that mirror Sonic's silhouette with a precision that communicates the copy's accuracy and the copy's coldness simultaneously. Metal Sonic does not speak in most appearances, he does not quip, he does not express personality through dialogue, he expresses identity through pursuit, through the relentless, mechanically perfect chase sequences that define his encounters with Sonic across the franchise. Sonic CD's Stardust Speedway race is Metal Sonic's defining moment, a head-to-head sprint through a collapsing environment where the loser is destroyed and the winner earns nothing except confirmation that they are the fastest. The race is not a battle, it is a measurement, a test whose only metric is speed and whose only audience is the entity that built the test to determine which version of himself is real. Sonic Heroes revealed that Metal Sonic's ambitions extend beyond his programming. Neo Metal Sonic, the evolved form that disguised itself as Eggman throughout the entire game, demonstrated sentience, independence, and an identity crisis whose resolution required Metal Sonic to absorb the data of every character in the game and transform into Metal Madnesses, and then Metal Overlord, a kaiju-sized mechanical dragon whose power required all 12 playable characters to defeat simultaneously. Metal Sonic is the franchise's most dangerous robotic villain because his threat is not his weaponry, it is his aspiration. He does not want to destroy Sonic, he wants to be Sonic, and the impossibility of a machine becoming the person it was built to replace is the tragedy that drives every Metal Sonic appearance. If you are enjoying this so far, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment with the Sonic villain you think is the most underrated. Let us get back into it. Chaos. He is a god made of water, and the water remembers every wrong that was ever done to it. Chaos is the primary antagonist of Sonic Adventure, an ancient creature of pure liquid chaos energy who served as the guardian of the Cheo and the protector of the Master Emerald's altar 4,000 years before the game's events. The Echidna clan, led by Chief Pachacamac, attacked the altar to seize the Chaos Emeralds for military use against their enemies, and the attack killed multiple Cheo, the small creatures Chaos had devoted its existence to protecting. Chaos absorbed the negative energy of the 7 Chaos Emeralds and transformed into perfect chaos, a kaiju-sized water entity whose rage flooded the ancient world and destroyed the Echidna civilization entirely. Tikal, a young Echidna priestess who opposed her father's raid, sealed Chaos inside the Master Emerald alongside herself, trapping both of them in a prison that held for 4 millennia until Eggman shattered the Emerald and released Chaos to use as a weapon. Chaos is the franchise's most sympathetic villain because his rage is not ambition. It is grief. He watched his children die. He watched the people who killed them celebrate. And the flood that consumed the Echidna civilization was not an attack. It was a funeral whose scale matched the loss. Perfect Chaos's rampage through Station Square in Sonic Adventure's climax is the franchise's most visually impressive boss encounter of the Dreamcast era, a towering water serpent whose body fills the flooded streets of a modern city while Supersonic weaves between its tentacles and strikes at the creature's brain, visible through the translucent water of its head. Sonic defeats Perfect Chaos not by destroying it, but by neutralizing its negative energy, draining the rage from the emeralds and leaving Chaos in its base form, a small, childlike water creature whose fury has been exhausted and whose grief finally has been heard. Bose, the Biolizard. It is the prototype, and the prototype is what happens when the ultimate lifeform concept is executed without the refinement that Shadow's creation eventually achieved. The Biolizard is the first attempt at Project Shadow, a massive reptilian creature created by Professor Gerald Robotnik aboard the space colony Ark, whose biology incorporates chaos energy manipulation systems that its organic body cannot fully sustain. The Biolizard requires a life support system built into the Ark itself, mechanical umbilicals that feed it nutrients and regulate its biological functions because the creature's engineered physiology generates more energy than its organic systems can process without external support. The Biolizard is what Shadow would have been if Gerald had not refined the process. A being of immense power whose body is a prison rather than a vehicle, trapped on a space station because its biology cannot function independently. When the Biolizard fuses with the space colony Ark during Sonic Adventure 2's climax, becoming the final hazard, the creature's purpose becomes structural rather than combative. It is not attacking Super Sonic and Super Shadow. It is pulling the Ark toward Earth, using its chaos energy manipulation to override the chaos control that the Hedgehogs are using to push the station away. The final hazard is the franchise's first cooperative super form boss, requiring the player to switch between Super Sonic and Super Shadow to attack weak points that only one form can reach at a time. Black Doom. Shadow's other father wanted his weapon back, and the family reunion nearly ended the species. Black Doom is the leader of the Black Arms, an alien species that visits Earth every 50 years to harvest its population for biological resources, and his contribution to Shadow's creation is the genetic material that Professor Gerald incorporated into the ultimate lifeform's DNA to achieve the biological stability that the Biolizard failed to sustain. Shadow is half hedgehog, half Black Arms. The duality is not metaphorical. Black Doom's DNA is literally woven into Shadow's cellular structure, and the alien leader's claim on Shadow's loyalty is biological rather than emotional. Black Doom gave Shadow the genetic components that made the ultimate life form possible, and the price of that contribution was the expectation that Shadow would eventually serve the Black Arms' interests by neutralizing Earth's defenses from inside. The invasion in Shadow, the Hedgehog solo game, places Black Doom's forces across the planet simultaneously, and the alien leader's ability to communicate with Shadow telepathically through their shared genetic link gives him a persuasive channel that no other villain in the franchise possesses. Black Doom does not threaten Shadow. He offers him a family, an identity, a purpose that connects Shadow's engineered biology to a cosmic lineage that predates humanity. Devil Doom, the transformation Black Doom achieves after absorbing the 7 Chaos Emeralds, is the franchise's most mythologically loaded final boss, a two-headed cosmic entity whose defeat by Super Shadow represents not just a military victory, but a son destroying a father whose claim on his loyalty was genetic rather than earned. Mephiles the Dark. He killed Sonic. not defeated. Killed. Mephiles the Dark is the primary antagonist of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, a crystalline entity who represents the conscious intelligence of Solaris, a sun god worshipped by the kingdom of Soliana, who was split into two components during a failed experiment. Mephiles is the mind. Iblis, the flame creature whose apocalyptic fire dominates the game's future timeline, is the body. Mephiles' plan across the game is the reunification of mind and body into the complete Solaris, a being whose power threatens every timeline simultaneously, and the method requires Sonic's death because Sonic's death triggers the emotional response from Princess Elise that releases Iblis' seal. Mephiles kills Sonic by piercing him through the back with a crystalline energy beam while Sonic is distracted, a moment so unexpected in its directness that the franchise has never produced another villain capable of replicating the act. No other Sonic villain has killed Sonic. Mephiles did it without a boss fight, without a dramatic confrontation, without the ceremonial weight that the franchise typically attaches to its climactic moments. He simply struck from behind, and the hedgehog fell. Mephiles wears Shadow's form, absorbed from Shadow's shadow when the crystalline entity was released from the Scepter of Darkness, and his use of the stolen silhouette to manipulate Silver the Hedgehog into attempting to kill Sonic before Mephiles kills him himself is the franchise's most calculated piece of villainy. Sonic 2006's timeline is erased at the game's conclusion when Super Sonic, Super Shadow, and Super Silver defeat Solaris, and Elise blows out the Flame of Hope, preventing Solaris from ever existing. Mephiles is retroactively unmade. The villain who killed Sonic has been removed from the franchise's timeline so completely that the kill, the most significant act of violence any Sonic villain has ever committed, technically never occurred. Dark Gaia. He is the planet's nightmare, and the nightmare has been sleeping inside the Earth for millions of years. Dark Gaia is the primal entity responsible for the Werehog transformation in Sonic Unleashed, a being of pure destructive energy that exists inside the planet's core and whose awakening cycle drives the game's narrative. Every millions of years, Dark Gaia awakens, erupts from the planet's surface, and attempts to blanket the world in darkness. Light Gaia, its counterpart, awakens simultaneously and pushes Dark Gaia back, repairing the planet's surface and restoring the balance between light and darkness. The cycle has repeated since the planet's formation. Eggman accelerated the cycle by cracking the planet apart with his Chaos Energy Cannon, forcing Dark Gaia to awaken before the entity had accumulated enough energy to sustain its fully formed state. The premature awakening is what allows the dark energy to fragment and infect Sonic, transforming him into the Werehog. The fragments of Dark Gaia's consciousness leaked out during the planetary fracture and attached themselves to the nearest compatible host, Sonic, whose chaos energy-saturated biology provided a substrate that the dark energy could cling to. Perfect Dark Gaia, the entity's fully assembled form, is the franchise's largest non-mechanical final boss, a creature whose body spans the horizon and whose multiple eyes and serpentine limbs evoke Lovecraftian cosmic horror rendered at a scale that makes the planet itself look small. Eggman Nega. He is Eggman from somewhere else, and the somewhere else has never been consistently defined because the franchise uses him as a plug-in villain whose origin changes based on the story's needs. Eggman Nega appears in the Sonic Rush series as Eggman's counterpart from Blaze the Cat's Dimension, and in the Sonic Rivals series as Eggman's descendant from the future, and the franchise has never reconciled these two origins into a single continuity because reconciliation would require choosing one and abandoning the other. What both origins share is escalation. Eggman Nega exceeds Eggman's ambition in every dimension the franchise measures. Eggman wants to conquer the world. Eggman Nega wants to destroy it. Eggman builds machines that threaten cities. Eggman Nega builds machines that threaten dimensions. Eggman's ego prevents him from making sacrifices that would cost him the world he wants to rule. Eggman Nega's nihilism permits sacrifices that Eggman's ego cannot tolerate. The distinction is what makes Eggman Nega dangerous rather than redundant. He is not a copy of Eggman. He is the version of Eggman without the one trait that keeps the original from becoming an extinction-level threat: the desire to rule, the need for a world that exists to be ruled over, the ego that prevents Eggman from destroying the thing he wants to own. Zavok and the Deadly Six. The Zeti were were the franchise's most commercially calculated villain introduction, and the calculation produced a team that the fanbase has spent a decade wishing the franchise would stop using. The Deadly Six are a group of Zeti, a species native to the Lost Hex, a floating continent above Sonic's world whose inhabitants possess the ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields, including the electromagnetic systems that power Eggman's robots. Zavok is their leader, a red, hulking brute whose design communicates generic menace without the specificity that makes the franchise's better villains memorable. Zaz is the psychotic one, Xena is the vain one, Zomom is the hungry one, Master Zik is the elderly martial arts master, Zor is the nihilistic goth. Each one is a personality type rather than a character, a collection of traits assembled to fill a slot in a 6-villain roster without the narrative depth that would make any individual Zeti compelling in isolation. Eggman originally controlled the Deadly Six through a magical conch shell whose sound causes pain to Zeti biology. When Sonic kicks the conch away in one of the franchise's most frustrating plot contrivances, the Deadly Six break free, turn Eggman's robot army against him, and become the game's primary antagonists. The franchise has not invested enough in the Deadly Six to make them feel earned, and their continued reappearance across subsequent games, most notably Zavok's inclusion as a boss in multiple titles, generates fan frustration rather than fan engagement. Infinite, he is the franchise's most aesthetically successful villain introduction of the last decade, and the aesthetic is doing all the work because the characterization behind the mask is tissue thin. Infinite is a jackal mercenary whose squad was destroyed by Shadow during a gun raid, and the humiliation of the defeat, not the loss of his soldiers, but the personal humiliation of being called weak, drives him to bond with the Phantom Ruby, a gemstone whose reality-warping powers give him the ability to project illusions so convincing that they function as reality. The mask is Infinite's defining visual element, a geometric silver and black face covering whose angular design communicates threat through abstraction, the absence of a visible face creating an opponent whose expressions cannot be read and whose emotions cannot be gauged. The design works. Infinite looks dangerous. The theme song works. Infinite sounds dangerous. And the character fails to deliver on either promise because Sonic Forces, the game that introduces him, gives Infinite approximately 30 minutes of total screen time across a 5-hour campaign and devotes none of that time to developing the psychology that the aesthetic implies. Infinite is a villain whose concept exceeded the game's willingness to execute it. A character designed for a story that the production did not have the time, the budget, or the narrative ambition to tell. The end. Sonic Frontiers reached past every previous villain and found something waiting at the edge of the universe. The end is the final boss of Sonic Frontiers, an existential threat from beyond the stars whose nature, origin, and motivation represent the franchise's most ambitious piece of villain design because the end is not a character. It is a concept, an entity whose existence predates the planet, the Chaos Emeralds, and possibly the universe itself, and whose purpose, if purpose is the right word for something so ancient that motivation as humans understand it may not apply, is the cessation of all existence. The end destroyed the Ancients' civilization. The Ancients, the alien race whose technology forms the basis of Sonic Frontiers gameplay, fled their homeworld to escape the end and crashed on Sonic's planet, becoming the ancestors of the Cheo and leaving behind the cyberspace technology and the Titan Guardians that the game's narrative revolves around. The end followed them. It was sealed inside the moon of Sonic's planet by the last of the Ancients' technology, and its imprisonment has lasted millennia. The entity's consciousness pressing against the seal, while the civilization that imprisoned it fossilized into ruins that Sonic explores throughout the game. The end's defeat requires Eggman's cooperation, a moment where the franchise's primary villain and primary hero work together because the threat exceeds what either can address alone. Super Sonic fights the end in the game's true final encounter, and the entity's attacks are not physical. They are existential, reality-warping assaults that threaten to unmake the space the battle occupies. The end is the franchise's most powerful villain because its power scale operates outside the framework that every previous villain has operated within. Scourge the Hedgehog. He looked at infinite versions of himself being heroes and chose to be the villain because heroism is common and Scourge refuses to be common. Scourge, originally introduced as Anti-Sonic in the Archie comics continuity, is the Sonic of Mobius, a mirror dimension where the moral alignments are inverted. He began as a simple evil twin, a green-furred palette swap whose villainy was defined entirely by opposition to whatever Sonic represented. Writer Ian Flynn rebuilt the character from the ground up, transforming Anti-Sonic into Scourge through a narrative that gave the character agency, philosophy, and a self-awareness that makes his villainy deliberate rather than predetermined. Scourge actively chooses evil. He surveys the multiverse, observes infinite Sonics being heroes, and determines that differentiation is more valuable than virtue. Scourge conquered his home dimension, crowned himself king, assembled a team called the Suppression Squad, and ruled Moebius until the franchise's various heroes combined forces to defeat him. His super form, powered by the Anarchy Barrel rather than the Chaos Emeralds, produces a purple transformation whose color inverts Super Sonic's gold the same way Scourge's morality inverts Sonic's heroism. Dr. Starline. He's the fanboy who became a villain, and the fanboyism is the most terrifying thing about him. Dr. Starline is an original character from IDW Publishing's Sonic the Hedgehog comics, a platypus scientist whose obsession with Dr. Eggman drives every action he takes across the comic's run. Starline is not a rival to Eggman. He is a devotee, a man who studied Eggman's career the way a graduate student studies a professor's published work, analyzing the Doctor's victories and defeats with academic rigor and arriving at a conclusion that the franchise's 30-year history supports. Eggman's plans fail because Eggman does not account for Sonic's unpredictability. Starline's solution is to account for it, to build contingencies that address the specific variable that Eggman's ego prevents him from respecting. Starline approaches Eggman as a partner and is rejected. He approaches the franchise's other villains and is rejected. And the accumulated rejection transforms his admiration into a conviction that he can surpass the man he worshipped, leading to schemes that exceed Eggman's ambition while retaining the methodological discipline that Eggman's ego prohibits. Starline is the franchise's most intellectually dangerous villain because he has studied every failure the franchise has produced and has designed his approach specifically to avoid repeating them. His defeat, when it comes, is not caused by the same variables that defeat Eggman. It is caused by new variables, personal ones, emotional blind spots, that Starline's academic approach to villainy cannot model because academic approaches cannot model feelings, and the feelings that destroy his plans are the feelings he spent his career pretending did not affect his calculations. And that is every major villain the Sonic franchise has produced across 34 years of games, comics, cartoons, and films. The pattern underneath all of them is the same escalation the franchise has been riding since 1991. Eggman built robots. The robots were not enough. Eggman found gods. The gods were not enough. Eggman found dimensions. The dimensions were not enough. And the franchise kept reaching for bigger threats, cosmic entities, temporal parasites, existential horrors from beyond the stars, because the Hedgehog kept outrunning everything the franchise placed in front of him, and the only way to maintain tension was to make the thing in front of him bigger. The escalation has produced the franchise's best villains, Chaos and his grief, Mephiles and his patience, the End and its silence, and its worst, Zavok and his nothing. The pattern will continue because the Hedgehog will continue running, and the franchise will continue building things for him to run through, and the things will keep getting bigger because the Hedgehog has never once slowed down enough to make small things feel threatening. The villains are the scale against which Sonic's speed is measured, and the scale has gone from a fat man in a hovercraft to a cosmic entity that wants to end existence itself. 34 years, the Hedgehog has not changed, the scale has changed, yes, and the distance between a wrecking ball in Green Hill Zone and a god at the edge of the universe is the distance the franchise has traveled to keep a cartoon hedgehog interesting. The distance is working.